What's up, Mad World? I got a question from Chris again, and this time the question is related to being well-rounded. He wanted to know, was it an insult if someone refers to you as being well-rounded? Well, Chris, no, because you have to go back into when that concept became a thing, and it was when Marcos Ruas showed up in the UFC, and he kind of had skills everywhere. You saw him almost defeat every opponent with almost a different skill set. The mistake that most people make when it comes to being well-rounded is they think that you're 25% of this, and this to make up a whole. Well, there's no way to have a 25% ratio of every art that you train. It just won't happen. You can't just take 25% of boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and Thai boxing, the big four, because those are the very common ones. Now, there are other people who were defined as being well-rounded, but they use different arts. But you just can't take 25% of an art. And what you probably saw with Marcos Ruas was that he actually had closer to 50% Muay Thai skills, and then his jiu-jitsu and wrestling skills took care of the rest. Probably not evenly, but they took care of the rest. Or you could even argue that his kickboxing was closer to maybe 75%, and everything else took care of that 25%. Another thing you can't do is just look at the offensive skills. You have to also look at the defensive skills to recognize someone as being well-rounded as well. And you take a guy like Maurice Smith. Because of his time spent in Pancrase, he had enough defensive skills and awareness of other arts like jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and boxing to defend it against anybody who used those arts, enough to get back to his number one thing, which was his kickboxing. He was well-rounded in a sense, just not in an offensive format where you're going to see chokes or beautiful sweeps and takedowns. You have to look at Ruas, where he actually used those skills a little bit more offensively, because you actually saw him finish people. But then with Maurice Smith, he used those same skills, but it was more subtle. Then another person you look at who was well-rounded that will be defined almost as a specialist, just like Maurice Smith is Randy Couture. If you look at Randy Couture, what he was good at was being able to box and wrestle and put you up against the cage to take you down. And because he was in such great shape, if you did escape, he would just box and wrestle you again to the cage and take you down. Another guy to look at is Mark the Hammer Coleman. Not known for being well-rounded, but he completely was a well-rounded fighter. He had the ability to do the same thing as Randy, which was to box and wrestle in the middle of the mat as well as against the cage. A lot better than Randy. And when he got you down, he spent the majority of his time trying to ground and pound you into the mat, which is where the term kind of came from, is because of Mark Coleman's ground and pound skills. So right there, you have four men who represent being well-rounded. It's just not the classic martial arts setup that most people think. And you have to keep in mind that being well-rounded has matured and grown, and the definition has changed because the UFC is now 30 years old, all right, or getting close to be 30 years old next year. With that level of development, no one's well-rounded in the same way where they're just learning 4 different martial arts and claiming 25% of each one of those arts. It has matured and developed in such a way that now you can look at defensive skills and say, you know, this guy's well-rounded. Look at what happened with Ngannou's last fight, where he decided to become a takedown artist. So now you're having guys now knowing how to assess the situation and put themselves in the best situation to win, utilizing that well-rounded strategy. But I wouldn't go around saying that Ngannou's a D1 wrestler. But as we move forward from the original days and we see guys like George St. Pierre, who definitely is well-rounded, it's not an insult. If the greatest fighter in the game could be considered well-rounded, it's not an insult to be called well-rounded. You just have to understand proportions. Anderson Silva, definitely well-rounded. Vitor Belfort, being put into that well-rounded category is not an insult. And as you just saw Bobby naming off some names, you're definitely in good company. I think you have to be well-rounded these days, but just not in that martial art context. There's a lot of things that's going on inside the fight game now that you have to be more aware of, not just fighting styles. Anyway, that's my answer. So it's not an insult to be well-rounded. And yes, you need to try to learn skills that make you a more complete martial artist, just not offensively everywhere. Some of your best people are really good at stopping people from doing things to them. I am Coach Sess, and you've had words with the Mad Coach.